Okay, so this is my second video, and I've had a few DMs on Twitter saying that my previous video attempts to milk the Wreckfall situation for the purposes of drawing attention to the disabled community, and I'd like to address that. The use of discriminatory language and discussions about mental health, which have begun as a result of this terrible event, are a great thing. But what most people are not or may not be aware of is that this is also Disability Pride Month. And the main reason I am releasing a series of videos about disability in World of Warcraft is to draw attention to the fact that Blizzard is not doing enough with regards to the disabled community. I do not wish to take away from the discussion that is going on in the aftermath of Wreckfall's passing. Mental illness is disabling, and many disabled people suffer from depression as a result of their disability. For some, that can become suicidal. I've experienced suicidal ideology in the past myself. So I fully support the discussions going on in the aftermath of Wreckfall's passing. They are only a good thing for mental health, and disabled players will benefit from that discussion about mental illness. But mental illness is not the only disability that we need to address in our community. Now, I say this with respect to the content creator community, but even pillars of the WoW community who pride themselves on their open and accepting behaviour make the mistake of ignoring disabled gamers. And if you don't believe me, watch the weekly reset on the 22nd of June and watch Taliesin attack discrimination in the WoW community and recognise discrimination by sexuality, gender and race. But what about disability? I don't blame content creators like Taliesin or Preach for forgetting about the disabled community. After all, we are invisible in Azeroth. Every disabled gamer is represented by a non-disabled avatar, so you literally don't see us. There aren't many people making content talking about disability in the World of Warcraft community, and I hope in coming weeks and months to address that issue. But for now, on the 26th of this month, disabled people across America will be celebrating National Disability Independence Day, the 30th anniversary of the passing of the American with Disabilities Act. This legislation meant that disabled people in America finally had some legal protection, the same legal protection as the Civil Rights Act of 1964 afforded other Americans. But this legal status is barely represented in the gaming community, and it's not represented in Azeroth. And this is the reason why a discussion on representation is so important. The problem in Azeroth and in gaming, and many would argue in the real world, is that decisions about right and wrong and how to protect minority groups is often made by white, cis, non-disabled males. White, cis, non-disabled males can't possibly understand the impact that their decisions have on the minority groups that they are discussing, even if you ask those groups. If you've met one disabled person, you've met one disabled person. Every disabled person's experience of their disability is unique to them. And much like television before it, when gamers are fed a diet of successful, white, cis, non-disabled males, it only benefits that community. In a sense, ethnic minorities, gender, LGBTQ+, and disabled minorities suffer discrimination as a product of numerical minority. If you don't believe me when I say that, there's an article on CNN, and if you're anti-CNN, then there's the actual academic research paper that states exactly the same thing. It's peer-reviewed. I'll put it in the link below. Now, a popular streamer like Asmongold, by nature of his position, can use his position in the community to swing opinion with regards to these minorities. And as much as people will attack him for his views, in recent years he has taken a far more open and accepting position, except with regards to fairies and the disabled community, which I find odd considering he himself was a carer for his sick mother. And when forum posts like this, and yes, I know I used this in my last video, but you have no idea how long it takes me to do these edits, and you try cropping images with one hand, and let's see how you find it, are allowed to be posted and remain on the forums unchallenged, then representation becomes a problem. It isn't just in the external community that this is a problem, though. If you exclude characters wearing eye patches and all the blinded demon hunters who can magically still see, anyway, there have only been really 2 disabled characters in World of Warcraft. Zul'jin, the original troll boss, who we all murdered repeatedly in patch 2.3.0, who cut off his arm, and strangely, despite him being a troll, it never grew back. And Drekthar. Now, Drekthar is an important character to discuss, particularly for the disabled community, because his his representation is inconsistent. He wasn't in a wheelchair in Burning Crusade. He's never in a wheelchair in Alterac Valley, because Blizz knows better than to encourage the Alliance to zerg a person in a wheelchair. But he both is and isn't in a wheelchair in Legion, appearing in his wheelchair in the Shaman class Order Hall, but not if you manage to complete the rank 2 PvP sequence in the Undercity. So yeah, despite numerous Orc clan wars, Legion invasions, and of course we are now at the end of the 4th war, everyone in Azeroth seems to have survived unscathed or died. And please don't give me the magic Ex Machina argument, because if that were true, then we could simply raise everyone who died from the dead, and that would be really bad news for Shadowlands. When you mess with something like magic, and you make it lore instead of a player mechanic, you get debates like the one that evolved around the opening cinematics for BFA, with possibly the biggest mass res ever. And then of course Blizz has to cover it with, he's a special hero. And that's an Ex Machina as well. Where are the veterans' homes in Stormwind and Orgrimmar full of grizzled war vets? You can have them tell tall tales about events in Azeroth's past, and you can even make them interactive, like the Day That Deathwing Came storyline in the Badlands. An opportunity to discuss not only disability, but unreliable narration. Or in a world with Goblin and Gnomish engineering, how about you make the next engineering skill-up quest chain be a mech building competition between a Goblin and Gnomish engineer who require assistance to mobilise? You can have them both build mechs to attack each other because they blame each other for their loss of ability. And then when you finish the quest chain, you get a nice little scene where they fight it out, destroy each other's mechs, and then sit laughing in the rubble. And if you need to add more recipes, in the next patch you can start it all over again with new recipes. Now, those are just 2 ideas. Maybe you can do better. You can certainly do better than you're doing right now. Representation doesn't mean cramming a character representing a minority group into the main quest line. I'm not going to talk about that too much because there's been enough discussion about how that affected the storyline in BFA. I'm simply going to say that one of the most wonderful things about Azeroth is that there is always something to do beside the overarching expansion storyline. And it's in this way that you can make disabled people feel part of Azeroth. Representation is as important in Azeroth as it is in the real world. Now in 2006, Blizzard wrongly told the LGBTQ+ community to keep their sexuality out of Azeroth. In October 2019, while Asmongold was busy saying mentally ill people are disgusting, the LGBTQ community were talking about guild names and homophobia. Now, I talked about this in my last video. Language has power, but misrepresentation, not only of people and characters in the game, but in terms of your ideology, like we can see in regards to the LGBTQ plus characters that are finally arriving in Shadowlands. And regardless of whether you're talking about race, sexuality, gender identity, gender or disability, misrepresentation is another tool that people use to suppress minority groups. Harmful stereotypes are in many ways more damaging because they encourage people to think of the community in the wrong way. And one of the most powerful ways this is happening in the WoW community right now is with the assumption that accessibility options for disabled gamers come at the cost of the enjoyment and the mechanics that high skill player base players enjoy. It shouldn't, and it doesn't have to. More on that in my next video. Whatever minority group you belong to, it defines who you are, and you simply cannot leave it at the login screen. And Blizzard needs to do more to represent all minority communities in World of Warcraft, and especially during Disability Pride Month, the disabled community. Now, those are just my thoughts. I'd love to know what you think. Please get in touch.